There's a line on her cheek this morning, diagonal, faint, running from just under her eye down toward the corner of her mouth. And she's leaning into the bathroom mirror, trying to decide if it's new or if it's just been there so long, she's stopped registering it as strange. It's not new. She checks the other side of her face. Nothing. No line, no crease, no mark. Just the one side, every morning, same angle, same length, gone by the time she's had breakfast, but back again tomorrow, on the same cheek, like clockwork. If you've noticed something like this on your own face, you already know the detail that matters most. It's always the same side. Not random, not both cheeks taking turns. One side, night after night, for years, while the other side stays smooth. That asymmetry is the whole story, and almost nobody stops to ask why their face would age unevenly when nothing else in their routine, their skincare, their diet, their sun exposure, is applied unevenly. So what is? Here's the first thing worth sitting with. In the 8 or so hours you spend asleep, your face is doing something it does at no other point in your day, staying in one fixed position under sustained pressure for longer than almost any other activity you'll do this week. Not a stretch, not a workout, not a long drive. 8 hours, pressed against a surface, night after night, for one, if you're the age this video is speaking to, somewhere between 15 and 40 years of nights. That's the second observation, and it's the one people skip past because it sounds too simple to matter. It's not simple, it's just quiet. A pressure that small, applied for that long, doesn't register as an event. There's no bruise, no soreness, nothing your nervous system flags as damage, which is exactly why it never gets questioned. It doesn't hurt, so it doesn't seem to count. And the third observation is the one that actually convinced me this pattern was real and not something I was imagining in the faces I was looking at. The asymmetry doesn't fade by noon anymore. In someone in their 20s, a night spent pressed into a pillow leaves a temporary crease that's gone within the hour. The skin bounces back, the tissue underneath resets, no trace by the time they've had coffee. In someone 40, 50, 60, that same crease takes longer to release. Sometimes it doesn't release at all. It just becomes, I want to say permanent, but that's not quite right either. It becomes the resting shape. The face stops fully returning to where it started. 3 separate things, none of them dramatic on their own. A line that shows up on one side only. 8 hours of sustained, fixed pressure, repeated for decades. And a recovery time that used to be an hour, and now, for some people, is never. Put those 3 together, and you get a mechanism. And it's worth being precise about it, because the precision is what makes it useful. Your skin sits on top of a layer of connective tissue, the fascia, that wraps your muscles and holds everything in its relative position. Think of the skin on your cheek less like paint on a wall and more like fabric stretched over a frame. Press fabric against something firm for a few seconds, it springs back. Press it for 8 hours, every night, for years, and the fabric starts to learn that shape. It holds the crease longer. Eventually, it holds a version of the crease even when nothing is pressing on it. That's not a metaphor I'm reaching for. It's mechanically what's happening. The fascia has a property tissue engineers call creep. Under sustained load, connective tissue slowly deforms and takes longer to recover each time. And the recovery gets less complete with repetition. It's the same property that explains why a rope that's been coiled the same way for years never lies fully straight again. Nobody cut it, nobody weakened it, it was just held in one shape repeatedly, long enough that the shape became its default. Now add gravity into that same equation, because gravity isn't neutral here either. When you're lying on your side, the side you're lying on isn't just being pressed, it's being pressed while everything above it is also pulling downward into it. The pillow provides the resistance, gravity provides the direction, and your face is the material caught between the two, night after night, always on the same side, because, and this is worth checking on yourself tonight, almost nobody switches sides evenly. Most people have a dominant side. Left side sleepers stay left side sleepers for decades. That's not a guess about you specifically. That's just how sleep position tends to work once it's established, which is usually in childhood. Here's a comparison that actually holds up, and I want to be careful about it because I don't want to overstate it. Athletes who train one side of their body asymmetrically, a tennis player's dominant arm, a baseball pitcher's throwing shoulder, develop measurable, visible differences between their dominant and non-dominant sides over a career. Not because one side is injured, because one side absorbed load repeatedly in a consistent pattern over thousands of repetitions, while the other side didn't. Nobody looks at a professional pitcher's uneven shoulders and thinks something went wrong. They understand instantly that repeated, one-sided load produces a one-sided result. Your face is running the same experiment at a much smaller scale for many more repetitions. A tennis player trains maybe 2-3 hours a day. You sleep 8. I know that comparison might land strangely at first. A shoulder and a cheek aren't the same tissue, obviously, but the principle underneath is the one that matters. Load applied consistently to one side over years produces asymmetric change on that side. That principle doesn't care what tissue it's acting on. Everything I've just walked through, the crease, the sustained pressure, the incomplete recovery, the fascia's memory, the gravity working in the same direction as the mattress, connects through one system. And once you can see that system clearly on your own face, there's a version of this you can start addressing tonight rather than waiting for it to get worse. I'll walk through exactly how in a few minutes. But before I do, because everything I just showed you is really about one side absorbing years of quiet, repeated pressure, I built something for people who want the complete picture, not just the one piece I can cover in a single video. It's called the Connected Face Protocol, and it takes this same idea, pressure and pull accumulating through connected tissue, and maps it across your whole face. 12 fascial releases, sequenced over 30 days, with labeled diagrams showing you exactly where to place your hands for each one, and a daily tracking sheet so you can actually see the asymmetry closing instead of guessing. It's in the description and the pinned comment if you want the full sequence rather than the single piece we're covering here. Now, back to the side of the story that matters most, because the mechanism only becomes real when you see it in more than one face. My grandmother slept on her left side her entire adult life, and she had a theory about the crease on her cheek that had nothing to do with fascia. She thought it was just how her skin was, something she was born with, the same way she was born with brown eyes. She never questioned it because there was nothing to question it against. Nobody in her generation was talking about tissue and gravity and sustained load. The language for it simply didn't exist in the rooms she moved through. My mother slept on the same side. She says she doesn't know why, she just always has. And by the time she was in her 50s, she'd started noticing the same asymmetry her mother had, and she'd started covering it with the same kind of resigned humor. It's just the family face, she used to say, like it was inherited rather than repeated. And I slept on my left side too, for years, before I understood what I was looking at in my own mirror. Before I connected the crease to the pillow, to the 8 hours, to the fascia underneath. 3 women, 1 pattern, passed down not through genetics, but through habit. Because nobody in the earlier 2 generations had a reason to look at it differently. That's not a dramatic story. Nobody had a health crisis. Nobody went to a doctor about it. It's just 3 faces over roughly 70 years combined, quietly recording the same nightly pressure, and 3 women each assuming it was simply who they were. I guess a version of that story is sitting somewhere in your own family too, if you think about it for a second. Someone whose face you've always known at a particular angle, always turned slightly, always one cheek fuller than the other in every photo, and it never occurred to anyone in the room to ask why. Here's where the timeline actually matters. Because the effect isn't linear, it compounds. A financial advisor explaining compound interest to a new client usually reaches for the same example. Put away a small amount early, and the growth in the last few years dwarfs everything that came before it. Not because those final years contributed more, but because they're building on everything that accumulated underneath them. Tissue creep works on a version of that same curve, just running in the opposite direction. The pressure in your 20s barely registers. The tissue recovers fully, no measurable change. Somewhere in your 30s and 40s, recovery starts taking a little longer each year, and each night's pressure is now acting on tissue that hasn't fully reset from the night before. By your 50s and 60s, you're not dealing with one night of pressure. You're dealing with the accumulated, compounding total of every night that came before it, most of which you have no memory of and never noticed happening. That's the part that tends to unsettle people when they first hear it. And I don't think it should. It should do the opposite. If the asymmetry built slowly, through a repeated action you can identify precisely, then it's not a mystery and it's not something you're stuck with. It's something you have actual leverage over, starting tonight. Because the same mechanism that built it can be worked in reverse. So let's talk about what you actually do with this. The first level is the simplest, and you can start it the moment you finish watching this. Tonight, before you get into bed, notice which side you naturally gravitate toward. Don't force a change yet, just notice, honestly, without judgment. For most people, becoming aware of the pattern is the first crack in a habit that's been running on autopilot for decades. The second level, once you've noticed your pattern, is a small physical adjustment rather than a total overhaul. If you're a committed side sleeper, try alternating, even just 2 or 3 nights a week, on the opposite side breaks the total accumulation on the dominant side. If a full switch feels impossible, a slightly firmer or higher pillow on your dominant side reduces how deeply your cheek sinks into the surface, which reduces the total pressure per night, even if the side itself doesn't change. Small adjustment, consistent application. That's the level most people can actually sustain. The third level, for anyone who wants to actively work the tissue rather than just reduce future pressure, is a release you can do in under 2 minutes, and it targets exactly the mechanism we've been talking about. Fascia that's learned to sit in a compressed position and needs to be reminded it can move freely again. Sit or stand comfortably. With clean hands, place 2 fingers flat against the cheek that shows the asymmetry, the side with the crease, the side that's been carrying the load. Apply gentle, steady pressure, not a rub, just contact, and hold for 10 slow breaths while very slightly shifting the skin upward and outward, away from where gravity has been pulling it. Release. Repeat 3 times. Do this in the morning, after the tissue has had all night to sit in its compressed shape, and before you've moved through your day. That timing matters, because you're working with tissue that's still warm and pliable from sleep, rather than tissue that's already settled into its daytime position. Do that consistently. Most people notice it easier to track if they do it daily for 2 to 3 weeks before judging whether it's working. Because tissue that's held a shape for years doesn't release in a single session. It releases the way it built, gradually, repeatedly, in the same direction every time. If you've watched this far, I guess you checked your own cheek at some point in the last few minutes. Most people do, the first time they hear this explained clearly. You go looking for the crease, for the asymmetry, for whichever side has been quietly absorbing more than the other. And most people find something. Not because their face is broken, and not because they did anything wrong, because this is simply what happens to skin resting on connective tissue that's been asked to hold one position for 8 hours a night, every night, for most of a lifetime. And almost nobody in your life has ever explained it to you in those terms, which is exactly why it felt like a private, slightly embarrassing thing to notice, rather than something shared by nearly everyone who sleeps on their side. It isn't private. It's common enough that if you're watching this, there's a reasonable chance the person sitting next to you on your couch has the exact same asymmetry on whichever side they favor, and has never once said anything about it out loud. I put a fair amount into laying this out clearly today. The observation, the mechanism, the family pattern, the actual steps, and if any of it landed, the smallest way to close the loop is just this. Try the level 1 step tonight. Notice your side, and if it's useful to you, tell me in the comments which side turned out to be yours. I read those, and it helps me know what to explain next. And if this is the kind of thing you want walk through again, mechanism first, action second, subscribing means you won't have to go looking for it later. Years from now, the version of you who's been alternating sides, or adjusting the pillow, or doing that 2-minute release in the mornings, is going to catch her reflection in an ordinary mirror on an ordinary morning, the way she has 10,000 times before. And for once, there won't be anything there to explain. No crease to check for, no side that looks different from the other. Just her own face, resting the way it was always built to rest. And she probably won't even register it as a victory, Because the whole point of fixing something this quiet is that eventually it just stops asking to be noticed at all. Which brings us back to that very first mirror, that very first morning, that faint diagonal line she almost didn't think twice about. The crease that, given enough consistent nights on the other side, simply stops showing up. Valid 1. There's a photograph in her hallway. She's maybe 6 years old in it, sitting on her grandmother's lap, and she's looked at it 1,000 times without noticing the things she noticed last week. Her grandmother's face, even at what must have been 60, is turned very slightly to the left. Not posed that way, just resting that way. The way a face rests when it's spent decades learning to sit at an angle. She went and found a mirror, turned her own head the way her grandmother's had been turned. And there it was, the same slight asymmetry. One cheek fuller, one side of her jaw sitting a little lower than the other. Nobody in her family had ever pointed it out. It had simply been passed down, generation to generation. The way a resting expression gets passed down without anyone deciding to teach it. If you've never compared old family photos side by side looking specifically for this, it's worth doing, because the pattern tends to repeat down a family line more consistently than almost anything else about how a face ages. And the reason has nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with which side of the pillow 3 generations of women happen to prefer. So what's actually being passed down here isn't a face shape, it's a habit. And it's worth understanding exactly how a habit becomes a shape. In the 8 or so hours, there's a photograph somewhere in your own family, if you go looking for it. An old one, someone resting, unposed, turned very slightly toward whichever side they favored for 40 or 50 years. And it's worth finding, not to feel anything sad about it, but because it's the clearest evidence you'll ever get that this pattern is learned, repeated, and passed down through habit, rather than fixed in place by anything permanent. Years from now, if someone in your family goes looking through old photographs of you, the ones from this decade forward, there's a real chance they won't find that same asymmetry. Not because you fought your face into a different shape, but because somewhere around now, you noticed which side you favored, adjusted it, worked the tissue gently in the mornings, and let 8 hours a night start working with you instead of against one cheek only. And the photograph they find will just look like a face, resting evenly, the way faces do when nothing has been quietly pulling it to one side for years. Variant 2. Put your hand flat against your left cheek right now, then your right. Don't think about it. Just notice, in the next 5 seconds, whether one side feels slightly fuller, slightly lower, slightly different under your palm than the other. Most people, doing this for the first time, find something. A small asymmetry they've never consciously registered, on a face they look at every single day. That's strange, if you think about it. You know your own face better than any other object in your life. You've seen it in mirrors, in windows, in photographs, thousands upon thousands of times. And most people can go their entire lives without ever noticing that one side of it has been quietly aging faster than the other. There's a reason for that blind spot, and it isn't vanity or carelessness. It's that the cause is invisible while it's happening. It happens for 8 hours a night, while you're unconscious, applied so gradually that no single night ever gives you anything to notice. You'd need to compare this morning to a morning from 15 years ago to actually see it, and almost nobody keeps that kind of photographic record of their own face. But your body kept the record. It's sitting right there under your palm. In the 8 or so hours, put your hand back against both cheeks one more time before you go. Not to check for a problem, just to notice, honestly, which side has been carrying more. Because that noticing is the entire first step and it costs you nothing. Somewhere down the road, after enough nights of alternating sides, or adjusting the pillow, or 2 quiet minutes each morning working the tissue back toward even, you'll do this same check without thinking about it. Hand against one cheek, hand against the other. And for the first time in years, your palm won't be able to tell you which side used to be the one you favored, because both sides will simply feel like your face, resting the way it was always meant to.